All right. Hey guys, it's Dr. Green. I wanted to just take a quick few minutes here. To record the lecture on data analysis and qualitative research for you guys. I want to make sure that you guys have this for Tuesday. So here we go. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we will knock this out. All right. Okay, guys. So here we go. We've been kind of taking a very brief overview. Sorry, my dog is losing his mind on a cheat toy. He does this every single time. Um, but we've been doing just a really brief overview of qualitative research, and kind of talking about obviously a lot of the. We spent class last week, obviously on Thursday, talking about a lot of the methodologies that exist within qualitative research and a lot of the sampling um, that we can employ right when recruiting subjects. But what happens after we've collected our data, after we've done our semi-structured interviews, after we've done our observations, right? How do we analyze the data? How do we ensure data quality within our qualitative studies? So obviously, there are various different ways that we can conceptualize this as far as um, kind of understanding the methodology that we can utilize. But one acronym that can be utilized to kind of uh, help us understand or analyze qualitative data is the creative acronym. So we'll just kind of break that down here, right? So obviously, first and foremost, we have to consider the study's questions and purpose statement. Uh, After we've collected our data, right? After we have um, completed our interviews, right? We have to read through our transcripts and gain a holistic sense of the data, right? Because if we haven't read through the transcripts and understand the nature of the data, we will not be able to break those down into themes, right? So obviously, it's our responsibility also as researchers to examine the data for information that's related to our research question in the first place, right? And then begin to label the data, label the units of information, right, that capture the meaning. And we'll be able to thematize the data. And I'll actually show you an example of that here in a second, right? So we talked about that as we interview more and more participants within our qualitative studies, we're going to achieve something known as data saturation, and that is the point where all of our participants really start to say kind of similar things, right? That is how we know that we've begun to capture the meaning of a certain phenomenon and or of a certain theory, what have you, right? Any type of question that's appropriate for qualitative study, right? So obviously, after assigning labels and thematizing the data, we'll interpret the emergent themes as they relate to the study. It's really important. We're going to talk about. We're going to spend more time actually in this lecture talking about verifying the trustworthiness of the findings, right? And that's going to impact what's called our credibility, and we'll talk about that in a second. But credibility is very much likened to validity in a lot of our experimental studies, right? So we have to verify the trustworthiness of our findings, and we're going to learn a handful of things here in a minute that are going to allow us to do that, right? And then after we've obviously analyzed our data, we can obviously engage in writing and begin to obviously discuss these themes in our results section of our qualitative study. So here's the deal. What does this look like? Okay, so I gave you an example of a study that I conducted when I was working on my doctorate, right? Talking about or looking at concussion symptomatology experience in collegiate athletes. And so ultimately, you can see that what we've done is we've taken raw data. So the raw data really are the actual words that come out of the participant's mouth during the interview, right? To allow us to kind of capture what they're telling us, right? And so we take each piece of raw data, um, and we actually kind of group those into basically into groups, right? And so you can see here at the top, So we have one piece of raw data, and the raw data there says, "I have never played through any injury or through an injury involved with the head or anything like that, right?" And so we assign this a preliminary code in our code book, and we named that injury awareness, right? So, and you can see we did the exact same thing. Uh, we had the raw data, and then we just assigned a preliminary code or label to that. So blacking out, right? That's perceived as serious. Another quote from a participant, right? You have one being a concussion when you start feeling dizzy and have all the symptoms, right? There was a kind of a noted broad symptom experience that appeared to be almost exclusively associated with concussion, right? Which we know is not really true, because there can be many symptoms that can be associated with concussion. Um, so obviously, you can see we've taken down every piece of raw data, right, and we've labeled it, and then we've broken that down into themes, right? So thematization, that's actually kind of that's the process that we just saw on the previous slide, right? Taking the raw data, breaking it down, labeling it, and then developing that into themes. So, and as we read through and as we become familiar with a lot of our transcripts, that is going to occur naturally, right? So, like I said, we're going to start to notice we're going to start to notice patterns, right? And that is really going to be a product of achieving data saturation. So, in this study that we conducted, we really identified 5 different final themes from the raw data, right? The first one that we were able to identify was flawed symptom conceptualization, meaning that people believed that there were an exclusive list and or some sort of a totality of symptoms that represented what concussion was, right? Uh, we also saw that there was a cognitive effect of symptom impact, right? People tended to experience like psychosocial and or emotional symptoms with concussion. There are those obviously who experience social relational deficits and or did not feel like they were as socially engaged and or that they could put in the time or energy into significant relationships that they might have had in their lives, right? And 2 additional themes here were present and future health-related quality of life concerns, and then memory concerns, right? So we obviously developed all of those themes from the raw data. So, you know, the themes really are those things that emerge, right, within qualitative studies that we write about in the results section of a qualitative paper, right? And those themes are going to allow us to identify patterns. Um, and so ultimately, it's those patterns that allow us to establish theories, definitions, and meaning, right, within qualitative study. So you can kind of see at the bottom here, we have a little flow chart down here. So we collect the data in order to achieve data saturation. And then once we achieve data saturation, we can analyze the data, obviously, to kind of further explore these themes. So as we'll see here in a minute, there are various different methodologies that can be utilized um, to ensure data quality and integrity in qualitative studies. One of the ones that we're going to spend the most time on here in a second is triangulation. So triangulation, as we'll see in a minute, is the use of multiple different methodologies when conducting qualitative research in order to ensure not only that we're achieving data saturation, right, but that we are also that we are also obviously gaining as broad of a perspective as possible. Excuse me, um, in regards to a given problem. Um, we'll also briefly discuss peer reviews. That is a piece of triangulation, and then we'll talk about member checks briefly as well. So, triangulation. What is triangulation? I told you guys that I would define that for you last week. But triangulation refers to the use of multiple methodological approaches within qualitative research, right? Because we remember, we've said this multiple times, we want to achieve data saturation, right? So researchers, excuse me, researchers may wish, obviously, to capture a problem or experience from multiple vantage points or perspectives, right? And they can use multiple methodologies to do that. And so that's triangulation, right? So over here on the right-hand side, um, you know, one approach. So we said when we talked about methods last week within qualitative studies that we can obviously conduct our semi-structured interviews, but that another method, right, for collecting data within qualitative study was also field observations, right, and actually collecting field notes. So we can use multiple methodological approaches, surveys, interviews, and even observations, right? And if we bring all of those things together, we can obviously triangulate or piece those pieces of data together to not only achieve data saturation, but to gain a full picture of our problem, right? So it is really important, though, that in order to also achieve triangulation, when our data is being analyzed, if we're using multiple researchers or a research team, we may bring in multiple researchers that know about this subject, right? That are regarded as experts, maybe that have previously published on this topic, right? But it's really important to note that if you're bringing somebody in within a qualitative study in order to analyze data, they have to be a subject matter expert, right? In that regard, right? And so they have to have a significant level of experience with that problem or question at hand. So it's really important to know, right, um, that member checks and also obviously peer reviews can also be really valuable, obviously, in achieving triangulation, right? So the greater the level of triangulation, the higher rigor and certainty of capturing rich data, right? So this utilizing triangulation is essentially synonymous in experimental studies with having really high levels of internal validity. Okay, so the greater the level of triangulation, the higher the internal validity, right, in a qualitative study. So, as we've already said, kind of validity of the data is synonymous, obviously, with credibility. So, credibility is referred to essentially as the believability of your data, right? If somebody were to read your paper, right, how likely would they be to essentially believe that the data you collected and or the interviews that you conducted were truly representative of a population and or of a problem that you were trying to study, right? So in the qualitative world, okay, the reliability of the data as it is in the quantitative world is often also referred to as the reproducibility of your findings, right? If somebody were to take your same methodology in a qualitative study and attempt to reproduce that, would they be able to um, ultimately find the same level of data saturation, and would they potentially even find the same themes, right? And so credibility, validity, and reliability all are reflections of the quality of your data, right? Within a qualitative study. So we talked a little bit about member checks and debriefings, right? So member checks, remember, as we said, is where I interview someone, right? I interview a participant in a qualitative study, and then I bring that person back in to read through the transcript that I collected to ensure that I appropriately captured what they were trying to tell me, right? And so member checks is a very, very common method of triangulation used for data quality and qualitative studies. In the study that we introduced, talking about concussion symptomatology, that is the method that we used to ensure data quality, right? So obviously, also we can utilize debriefing, and then also obviously there we're utilizing an additional qualitative researcher as a part of a team to obviously read through our transcripts and determine the credibility of the data, right? To ensure that we have appropriately captured the meaning with what that the participant was trying to convey, right? All right, so guys, that is a very quick kind of overview of data analysis and qualitative research. Once again, very brief, but that is that's it. So thank you guys very much. Please watch this for Tuesday. And God willing, I will see everybody back on Thursday. Okay. Thank you all for putting up with my crazy schedule at this time of year. So I appreciate all of you very much. And soon we'll be able to do donuts, hopefully. So, yeah, you guys take care, and I will see all of you, God willing, Thursday. Okay. Have a great week.